Your brand is your product. If that sucks and the experience sucks, doesn't matter how creative your marketing ideas are, you're not building a brand.
Hello, Sam. How are you doing?
Hello, Avery. I am great. When this episode comes out, Avery, the Super Bowl will have happened. We will know the winner. I know you are on location at actually, where is it again this year?
New Orleans. I'm not on location of the actual game, but I am in the city of New Orleans, and you can just feel it. The ads are adding, the marketers are marketing, and there is so much happening on the ground here right now in New Orleans.
You are there in New Orleans. Is the Super Bowl like the All-Star game where there's a whole week of activities? Bring people through the experience of what you're doing there right now, what Vayner's doing, what you're expecting to happen at the game, and I want your prediction of who's going to win.
Ooh, okay. So to give people a little bit of context, you say you're getting off the plane, you're taking the escalator down in New Orleans right now. People are passing out Mardi Gras beads, and you just see ads everywhere. It's Verizon, it's Bud Light, it's Pepsi, all really activating in a big way around sort of game day. Not only the game itself, but really the whole cultural moment of Super Bowl. So in town, we have a lot of celebrities, we have a lot of athletes, we have a lot of famous people, and we also have a lot of eyes on New Orleans just from a pure press and media coverage standpoint. So if you walk down Bourbon Street, it is totally closed off just for pedestrians. So people can be seeing all of the fun New Orleans things, whether that's Pat O'Brien's or a hurricane or whatever it is, plus plenty of pop-ups that brands are doing at a lot of these sort of local spots. And what we are doing as Vayner, we're actually activating for over a dozen brands this Super Bowl season, which is very fun, including 2 spots, one really fun one for Tubi and one for Duracell, which has actually not been released yet. So it will be released live during the game, which, as funny as it is to say that, is actually a rarity these days because most brands pre-release their spots. So yeah, we'll be making all that happen, from taking content on the ground at fun places like, the Fanatics party and the Crown Royal tailgate, to doing these big spots, to also having tons of people back at home in the war room, making sure that these brands break through on social, whether that is, the work that we're doing for Sabra or for Meta Reality Labs, or the list goes on and on and on. But there's spots, there's on ground, and then of course there's the whole war room, winning the game online, which is increasingly a bigger and bigger way that people sort of experience the moment of the Super Bowl. My prediction of who's going to win, gotta say Team Taylor. So the Chiefs. What do you think, Sam?
I'm going to take the Eagles, so I'll take the other side on this.
Okay.
We will bet a cocktail next time I see you.
Let's do it. A hurricane, maybe.
Maybe a hurricane. That would be great. Yeah, I mean, we're recording this right during Super Bowl week. We just had the Grammys, which I know is sort of slightly different due to the realities of the LA fires. And I know that kind of affected the show itself. But the show was fantastic, and I think was definitely one of the bright spots of what's going on in LA. I know they raised a bunch of money, as well as they had the concert last week. We have the Oscars coming soon. I mean, we are in prime big event season. You mentioned you're going to have this war room that, who can win on social is really the key. At some point, is this a diminishing returns game when we think of all the big activities that are happening over the next couple of weeks? Or I guess, or is social so fleeting at this point that you just have to keep in the conversation no matter what the event is going on in order to play the brand game?
A big belief that we have at Vayner is that the Super Bowl is still the most underpriced media asset because you have 140 million Americans tuning in. So for $7 million, it's actually not bad. People are actually paying attention. And that's maybe the one time of the year where people are like looking forward to seeing an ad, and the rest of their life, they're skipping, they're going to the bathroom, they're just, on their phones during any type of ad break. But, in Super Bowl, people are actively like, oh, I love these ads. I want to see it. I want to, critique it and sort of sound off on social. So I would say the Super Bowl is a bit different than some of the other big events that you mentioned, because there is just a culture of ads in a way that is unique. At the same time, I think that, for many big brands, it's not so much an awareness challenge as like a relevance challenge. And the more opportunities you have as a brand to stay relevant, the better.
Sounds good. So you don't think that there is everyone's going to be on social, so therefore no one's going to win? And, I guess one of the things I think about, and this comes up in our conversation with our guest today, is the idea of, brand versus attention. And I think when we think of the Super Bowl spots, a lot of them still are rewarded for creativity. Everyone loves talking about which ones they love, they hated, who won the night.
Who broke the format? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's all this the conversation of what happens when people are just like, how clever and quirky can we be because someone fumbled or the lights go out or whatever happens at Super Bowls, as we know. Do we think that maybe people are getting tired of the like constant in real time commentary, and maybe it can like ever go back to just being about the ads, and that should be the conversation we're having?
It's a good question, Sam. I feel like people love to vote on their favorite ads. Like the USA Today, like ad meter is a huge thing that like normal consumers like to vote on their favorite Super Bowl ad, the best ones of all time. Is it Budweiser Frogs? Is it Always Like a Girl? There's so many of these like iconic ads, but there are also so many brands who don't do a spot that like break through on social through funny commentary or something like that. I think it's an and game of some people, some are more active, like, maybe if we're looking at millennials or Gen Z, they're very active on social. If I think about like my parents watching the game, like they're not on Twitter giving their 2 cents on the ads. So I think it depends like sort of who you are and how you experience the game. And as I mentioned before, so many spots are pre-released. So many of them have already kind of been in the wild, seeding it before. So I think it's an and. It's like some people are there. But one thing I do want to call out, Sam, is you said if everyone's there, does it even matter? Everyone isn't on social from a brand perspective, which is crazy, but they're not really active. Like, yes, they might post on Instagram, but they're not like really leaning into the culture of social. And this, I feel like, Sam, you get so well just from your experience as a marketing leader and brand builder, is like you have to be of the culture. Just like posting a static image on Instagram, like it won't do anything for you anymore.
Well, brands, if you're not on social, Avery@Vayner.com, just make sure you reach out. We will get you hooked up. Avery, one other thing I wanted to ask you about is the idea of, we're now 2 or 3 weeks into the conversation around DeepSeek. Yep. We didn't talk about it very much, but I did want to sort of bring up, there's like now all this meta conversation about, maybe it actually wasn't a $5 million model. In fact, maybe they've spent $1 billion. Maybe they actually have some of these NVIDIA chips, the H100s. But it still feels like it's been a big, big disruption. And the other thing about it, which I really enjoy, is it's pushed back the conversation of AI being open source versus wholly owned by these large entities. So I guess I'm just wondering, when you are hearing about the DeepSeek conversation within both your like peers and on the brand side, is there any, does anyone have a take right now yet on what their sort of approach to DeepSeek is?
Yeah, I think people are still looking at this as like the cheaper alternative. That's like the leading school of thought that I'm hearing in sort of the peer set is like, well, like if it's possible to do it for way cheaper, maybe this is not the cost barrier that we thought it was. But as you just mentioned, now it's like people are questioning, is that actually true? Is that really possible? And that's kind of like the gray area that I think we're in right now. But I feel like, undoubtedly DeepSeek is a competitive product to a ChatGPT or a Gemini or something like that. And now there are so many of them. ChatGPT was like the early mover, but now there's a ton of them and people have their favorite models. The big tech companies are investing in this more. And there are also so many companies like investing in almost like building a wrapper around these tools to make them like more useful or more specific. I think the conversation on like trained AI agents right now is that to me is like the bigger thing that people, at least in my peer set and clients, are like trying to figure out. And DeepSeek is just more a thing where we're like scratching our heads, like, did they really do that for $5 million? And if so, could someone else do that? What do you think though, Sam?
Well, I think it's interesting is I remember the uproar that happened both with OpenAI and with Google's LLMs, when you would put in, show me a picture of the president of the United States, and it would come back as a Black woman, or something like that, and people were accusing it of being so woke, right? And then there's this big article in the New York Times, I think it was last Thursday, about how the results of DeepSeek very heavily favor propaganda talking points of the Chinese government. And granted, this is the new kid on the block. It's only been out for a couple of weeks, but I haven't heard the uproar around how much like influence that's going to have over sort of young kids and young minds, and the stuff that I would have expected would have been one of the first things to say, hey, yes, it's the #1 downloaded app in the App Store, but is this the app we want people to download? And then I think about all the competitive nature of what's going on with China and us, and and I'm just actually surprised the administration hasn't said something about this, because it sort of happened right around the cusp of the inauguration, right? So it's now the new administration coming in saying, "Are you sure you want this going on?" It's just been interesting, the lack of that conversation.
The timing of it is very strange, because you're right, in a world where we're hearing so much about certain Chinese companies, not on this one.
Yeah. And then I guess my final point before we get to our guest is, because you're at the Super Bowl, and I was just reading this yesterday, it does appear like, our President Trump is going to be at the Super Bowl.
Oh, yes. Should I invite him to Gary's party?
You should invite him to Gary's party. There's sort of never a big moment that he doesn't want to get involved with. But it did make me think of, we've seen this flurry over the last 2 weeks of these executive orders. A lot of them are ones that have people pretty upset about all these different sort of more social issues. And, I just thought, do you have any tips on sort of managing brand presence in a time of chaos? Or is it really just like, focus on your features and benefits, don't get into the wider conversation?
It depends what brand you are, because I think some brands can jump in and be playful, and like that's their persona and that's their personality. Some brands are probably better safe to focus on staying apolitical, staying for everyone. That's where I feel like most brands are. But, smaller brands that are founder-led, founder-owned, I think have been making us, sharing their perspective on a variety of different issues, which might not be explicitly political, but are sort of like tied up in, some of the recent announcements.
All right.
It's such a fine line, Sam. But anyway, we have a good guest.
I'm really interested to see next week if there's if more of the conversation ends up being about the president being there, and whatever happens, did he show up with Theo Vaughn or somebody, or are we going to actually focus on the ads?
Or Elon.
Or Elon, the branding, the marketing. Anyway, with that, Avery, let's get to our guest. Mayur Gupta, Chief Marketing and Growth Officer at Kraken. For anyone who doesn't know in our audience, I'm surprised if you didn't, but if you didn't, they're one of the top 5 crypto exchanges. They've been around for now 14 years. One of the sort of older, more established brands in the crypto space. Mayur himself has a really, really fascinating background. Was a developer, became a CMO, was at Spotify and a bunch of really cool brands. So we're going to talk with him about his insights on both the crypto industry, but also marketing in general. So stay with us after the break, and go Eagles.
Go Chiefs.
We all want to believe in something. In Chinese, belief also means trust. We want to trust our systems and each other to explore new frontiers and build a future beyond what we know. For the past 10 years at Consensus, pioneers, builders, and dreamers have gathered together to create a new financial system where everyone has value. Join us at Consensus Hong Kong, where belief becomes real.
This is an episode that I am very excited to host. We have an iconic leader in the crypto industry who we've been trying to get on this podcast for quite a while. So today is the day, and Gen Z listeners, you are in for a treat. I'm excited to have Mayur Gupta on, the Chief Marketing and Growth Officer at Kraken. Mayur, tell us a little TLDR on who you are.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for having me, Sam and Avery. I've been a big fan, and I'm glad we're finally doing this. But TLDR, I'll try and make it brief. So, grew up in India. Did my major in computer science. Like many kids, that was the most sure way of getting a gig. So started as an engineer, got a chance to move to the US in 2002. Spent the first few years, building platforms for Cisco, Kaiser Permanente. But I think my career has probably had 3 pivots, so I can summarize it. I think the first pivot came when I was at Sapient for the first 12 years, and we acquired an ad tech product company in Miami in 2006. That was my pivot one. One of my mentors asked me to be a product manager. So I evolved from pure engineering to building products for marketing and advertising. And that was my entry into that world from a very tech standpoint. And then the second pivot was when I finally left Sapient after 12 years to go on the brand side. So led e-commerce at Kimberly-Clark, and then had one of the best opportunities to work at Spotify as a VP of growth. So went on the brand side, evolved from marketing to growth and data. And then the final pivot for me, I feel, hopefully this is the last one until I die, is back in late 2021. I had a great chance to connect with Jesse, who's been one of the crypto OGs and a founder and chairman now. And as life would have it, joined Kraken in early 2022. And since then, I've been living and breathing Kraken and crypto and this amazing movement to change the world.
First of all, thank you again for being here. I was really interested to look at your background and see that you started as like a Java developer, and here you are, a CMO, CGO, at one of the largest crypto exchanges. I was wondering, yeah, like the mind shift one has to make from kind of being a developer and an engineer to a marketer. For our audience, how similar are those processes, or how different are those thought processes to get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm sure there are a lot of engineers out there raising their eyebrows thinking about me as a Java, J2E, C++ developer. I did that. I will not claim that I was one of the best, but I think I did work a lot, tried my best. But I think there's similarities, Sam, and there's one or two things that I think are different. But I would absolutely say that as a professional, as a human, I think my first principles are still rooted in what I learned through engineering, which is first and foremost, the ability to system think, the ability to get into the weeds, go deep in areas, but also zoom out. And I think I credit that back to what you learn as an engineer. You have to go into the weeds to engineer something, but you have to zoom out to know how to architect what you're engineering. And I think I've applied that both in my professional and personal lives. But I think the most fundamental difference I learned from my first few years as an engineer, then even while building products, which I took me a long time to really gather, was the difference between inputs and outcomes. I think the first 10 odd years in my career were all about inputs. I was so engrossed, I was so myopic, the horse with the blinders, I could only see this much. And I think I was so obsessed with inputs. But as I evolved and also got into the world of marketing and then growth, I realized that it's really about the outcomes, because it's the outcomes that the customer sees. It's the outcomes that impact the business, and the inputs are the enabler. But as a technologist, you think technology is the end. And once you bring that mindset shift, you realize that technology is a means to an outcome. And I often see within marketing too, we get so obsessed with campaigns and different type of vanity KPIs, which all of them really are the inputs, and we obsess less over the ultimate outcome. But the last thing I would say, which is most fascinating for me, is the DNA of a modern executive no longer isolates between the traditional verticals of data, tech, product, marketing. I think the DNA of a modern exec is going deep in all those areas. So a great marketer, a great product person, a great growth person, they all are rooted in data. They are trying to move fast. They believe in experimentation as a stronger value than perfection. They're obsessed with the customer value. So I think there are a lot more synergies across those functions than dissimilarities.
That's really interesting for you to say that. And I've been following some of your LinkedIn posts where you kind of give advice and, the focus on outputs and outcomes, and what actually moves the business versus sort of what you refer to as vanity KPIs, which, marketers love winning Cannes Lion and stuff, which is wonderful. But like, if your business isn't growing, did it matter? Like, creativity should be a driver of business results. And often it is, but often sort of marketers get stuck in a different world. I'm curious how you think about sort of the function of marketing, because you've worked across several different verticals, right? Like currently you're in crypto, where you said it's changing the world. You've been in CPG. How do you see that function sort of differing or staying the same across different business verticals?
Yeah, I think I very strongly believe marketing is one function that has dramatically shifted in the last 15 years more than any other function, because technology evolves so much. Our ability to measure and hold marketing accountable is night and day different. In fact, a lot of the people, the perception they have about marketing is still rooted back in the days of Mad Men, where the only lever you had was to be most witty, one of the most creative ads. Consumers were gullible. You come up with that idea, put it on the shelf, and if it made sense, people would buy it. Since 2001, and then the big disruption in 2007 and 8, when two things happened: social, Meta, or Facebook and iOS totally changed the landscape, and marketing massively changed, became more accountable. There was a period of time when brand still has actually become a bad word in the craft, because a lot of people think that marketing is a cost center. So we have been in this engine or this phase to evolve marketing from a cost center to a growth engine. But a lot of times, especially Alvary, I feel in product-led tech companies, that's where marketing and the role of marketing has disrupted way more than CPGs. If you're not direct to consumer, the first principles are still very similar. But in product-led tech companies, where phase one of growth has actually happened in the absence of any marketing, because it was purely product-led. It was word of mouth. It was network effect virality, which, by the way, happened with Kraken, happened with Google, happened with Spotify. And rightly so. For them, when you parachute marketing in the second phase, on day one, you're facing the wall because you have to prove why marketing matters when it wasn't needed for the company to get to the $1 billion in net revenue. So it's a very different dynamic. And I feel that the function of marketing in those organizations and what you need to be successful is very different from what you needed in the past or what you need, let's say, to be successful in a CPG environment where marketing is the sole growth engine for that organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in CPG world, where so much of the products are like extremely similar, right? Like you do taste tests and they can't tell the difference between one thing, consumers, but they can tell what brand they like. So the function of brand, if you're a beer company, is like it's everything versus, downloading different apps, which so much of that is product led growth. That's a very like Silicon Valley way of thinking about it. They obviously invest in brand too, but I think it's like really two ends of the spectrum of how important marketing is to an organization.
Yeah. See, that I love that topic, and obviously I've learned through a lot of mistakes and failures too. But I'm so passionate about that concept of what is brand, especially in a product-led company. And I absolutely believe that first, brand is an outcome; it's not an input. Sometimes we convolute brand as in brand marketing. That's just one of many things you do to build a brand. But most importantly, when you're a product-led company, in the first phase of growth, your brand is your product. If that sucks and the experience sucks, doesn't matter how creative your marketing ideas are, you're not building a brand. And then two, your second strongest product is your user base, is your customers. And how are they talking about you? And then once you've done that, then you can start to gradually amplify. Once you have proven product market fit, once you have proven that what you built is strong enough in a particular market and resonating with your core audience, then you can bring the function of marketing and more spend. But I also feel, I know this is not where we were going, but this is so critical for the craft of marketing. This always on battle that we're all fighting between brand and performance. And it is so misplaced. It is because the genesis of this collision, I think, arises from the fact that we at one point thought performance is one type of marketing that works and brand is a type of marketing that feels good but doesn't quite work. And some of this also comes with, ironically, the branding itself that we've created for brand and performance. But I think fundamentally that is so disconnected because these are all different crafts of marketing and they're all meant to drive performance. They're all meant to drive business forward.
I'm just going to jump in one more time before Sam goes. I completely agree with you. I mean, at Vayner, we're more of like a brand driven house. But I mean, brand is performance. Like that is like the moat around so many businesses. And we've sort of had this narrative recently around like performance marketing is really like performance sales. Like retargeting is not really like marketing. It's more like a sales function, right? Like they're already in the consideration set. Yeah, of course, we're reminding them and like that is the thing, but it's different than someone who's like, I'm going to choose to use this crypto exchange because I like it, because I affiliate with them, because that is something that matters to me. That really like shifts choice and preference in a very dramatically different way than something like a search ad, which is more of like a toll booth that's charging you for something that people are looking for. Of course it works. They were looking for your brand. Like it's so obvious, but it's very funny because just of like the early aughts Google last click attribution thing, people sort of got hooked on that. And they're like, this is the thing that works, but it is only one dimension of making something work.
I want to jump in and say, this is a intellectual curiosity that always resonates in my mind, right? The idea that I look at it like marketing is intellectual and brand is emotional. And the idea that, just going back to your engineering days, like marketing is a series of if-then statements that sometimes have bugs and sometimes function, right? Like that's basically the way you have to think about it. And people don't recognize, in the old days, I used to work with a guy, Doug Aiken, who was at Airbnb for a long time. And he wrote a book on the cult of brands and, focusing on Nike and Harley Davidson and Apple and how emotional those brands are to their users compared to, I think, what we're taught on almost on like TikTok, which is like, oh, I could just import something on Alibaba and resell it on, on Amazon, and I could build a business that way, which is true from a performance perspective, but it's not true at all from a brand perspective. It does feel, to Avery's point, like people went way down a performance road for too long and forgot the importance of brand. And that idea of like last mile became everything for folks. And I just wonder, because you worked in CPG and at Spotify, both CPG most big brands have whatever, a third of the world uses those products for a big brand. Spotify is like a 600 million subscriber business. These are giant scale businesses where brand is where people create emotional connection versus just doing price, right? So how do you look at that, and maybe how do you translate that to crypto, where we are still in the early stages in many respects of how many people in the world own crypto and transact in it? Like, how do you apply that brand thinking to a crypto exchange, with Kraken being one of the oldest? I think 2011 it started. So it's, people don't recognize how long Kraken's been around.
Yes, I think for me personally, I see some amazing similarities between my time at Spotify and what we are doing here at Kraken. But yes, we are one of the oldest, longest standing crypto exchanges. We are 13 plus years. And in fact, a lot of what you said about Sam, I feel very strongly about what we've done at Kraken, where we have built a brand more so through the inertia of our core product in the first 10 odd years, because there was no marketing at scale in the first 10 years. All our growth was rather organic, product led. The ethos of our co-founder and chairman now, Jesse Powell, who's been an OG, and living those values in a category which has struggled with trust, a category that is, at least in those years, was massively misunderstood. And so that's the brand that we have built, which again proves the point that you build the brand through your actions and the value that you deliver. And I think in crypto now, in this inflection point where we are in the 15th, 16th year of crypto as a category, and Kraken in its 14th year, brand plays a massive role. And again, to clarify, when I say brand plays a massive role, I'm not referring to brand marketing. That is one sliver, but I just mean the emotional connection, the cultural connection you build, which we strongly feel with the crypto community, that differentiates us besides, piggybacking on a product. I think that plays a massive role, because from a utility standpoint, there are a lot of exchanges, a lot of dexes, there's a lot of innovation happening. There'll be a lot out there. I think what will differentiate businesses will be the emotional connection that they have, will be the brand. Because think about, with all the stuff happening with AI, the barrier and differentiation on technology is getting more and more normalized, right? It's not like you have stronger engineers. It matters. So I'm a lot of respect for engineering and the products you build. But with technology and AI, I think that will normalize itself more and more and more. What differentiates you are your values, are the experiences you create, which ultimately builds that brand, which is what will resonate, especially as we go into the next stage of crypto's adoption, 1 billion people and more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this marketing of crypto is almost like it has the most macro, getting people to care about crypto and like why they should think about it. And then secondarily, why they should use Kraken, either as an onboarding, tool, or as, like a long-standing play. As you well know, many folks who already have crypto, like they have multiple methods. Maybe they have a ledger, maybe they use Kraken, maybe they use Coinbase, maybe it's a combination, maybe they're all in on one. But those are like two probably very different audiences when you think about how you communicate with them. How do you balance like those two segments? And is there another segment that isn't as obvious to the naked eye?
That's a great point. And it's funny. I was wondering, wait, did we talk about this already? Because this is exactly how I've always thought about it, at least in the, during the time when the last 3 years where there were only headwinds in the category, right? Or at least almost 3 years. And we always thought about it as a two-pronged battle in a way for a category that is so nascent, or at least was to a certain extent, where players like Kraken of our stature and the brand that we build, it's our responsibility to educate the world on the ethos and values of crypto. And we know this category has two broad layers. There is the surface, the superficiality, and the volatility, which many times overshadows the core substance, the movement that's underneath. We've always had to play a dual role. On one hand, educating the world on the value and the substance of crypto, and making sure that we play our part in creating that demand and stronger rooted education. But at the same time, the race is on. This is such fast moving, where you also have to establish yourself as a core protagonist, as one of the disruptors, which we have been, over these last many years. And that's been the balance. So the playbook that we've used is during tough times, or a typical bear run, which by the way, we've seen many bears and bulls. So we built this playbook. But during bear runs, we want to be, we of course, you don't want to be tone deaf. You want to be sensitive. So we've used that time to really bring as many people around the world as possible to the roots, to the basics, and help them understand what this is, so that when the markets move, which fingers crossed, like they are right now, they are no longer wondering, is this for me? We've already planted those seeds. So now the focus is, okay, now that we've spent last 2.5 years bringing you closer to this movement, now let me tell you how we differentiate ourselves. Why Kraken is the best companion, the best trusted platform for you to get to the next level of your own financial and economic freedom. So now the focus for us has shifted to very product-led, top-of-funnel brand marketing, where everything we do is product marketing. We are now in this mission to educate the world about what we are doing, why we are doing it, why differentiate yourself, and why it is centering around the value that you as a user can derive from our portfolio.
Mayur, I think people don't understand contextually how early we still are, and not to use too much crypto jargon, right? But you guys have been around 14 years, again, longer than most. When Apple had been 14 years old, it had just launched its first laser writer printer. It's like it was still calling its computers Macintosh. The PowerBook laptop wasn't even released. 16 years later would be the iPhone, right? So people don't understand that in the scope of technology, brand plays a role because you are innovating continually towards the future, and that there's an arc for companies like yourselves to play the innovation role. How do you look at a roadmap when people are so focused on what's the price of the Trump token today versus yesterday, and everything is so short term in the crypto mindset, at least on crypto Twitter? How do you think about, no, we're building something that's going to be around 18 months to 18 years from now?
Yes, I think that's a brilliant point. I'm going to share a couple of thoughts. One, I absolutely believe that we're on the cusp of what's called the early majority in a typical, technology revolution empirical study, right? I think that lasts like 13 to 15% or so before you reach the inflection point. And then there is this escape velocity of global adoption, right? So if you think about roughly 8 billion people in the world, maybe, close to 3 billion shop online, we are probably at 600 million people who are either actively or passively engaged in crypto. I think we're still in that early adoption phase, while it may seem longer. But I also very strongly believe this is the wave, the next 1 or 2 years, that it cross that chasm. And as we get closer to 1 billion people passively or actively engaging in crypto, that's when the spiral begins. But the biggest question I always ask myself when I talk to friends is, okay, why is it taking so long? And I always think, because if you compare this to at least the movements we've seen and witnessed in our lives, let's say the iPhone back in 07, early 08, or to a lesser extent, even mobility with Uber and stuff. When they came on board, it was skyrocketing. It has changed our lives. It's because the first time we experienced those products, we experienced the value. We did not open an iPhone and see, let me see what the heck is going on underneath and let's talk about technology. It was all about the value. I think crypto, because of the nature of disrupting a 100-year-old archaic system, which is our financial ecosystem, has spent the first 12 to 13 years more focused on the technology. And for early adopters, it makes sense, but for the normal person, they're still looking for value. And that's the shift that I very strongly believe is happening now, where now the conversation is pivoting. The big traditional players are coming in, where we are building experiences because technology has finally reached a point, the infrastructure has reached a point where we no longer have to worry about that. And now we are starting to see experiences that to an end user where they don't even have to differentiate. Hey, is this on-chain or is it traditional? Because for them, it doesn't matter. For them, what matters is they are now able to get access to the financial systems that back in the day was only restricted to a far field. And that's the magical tipping point, which, fingers crossed, let's hope that it happens now, and then it spirals.
That's really, the whole thing is super interesting. And Sam and I are big believers in crypto too. So of course we hope that this is all true. It's a long journey though, right? Kraken's been at this for well over a decade. And little by little, as everyone says, crypto comes in cycles. You started this call off by, mentioning you grew up in India, which is a country that has slower crypto adoption, though also has been plagued by hyperinflation. My husband's family is from there. And of course, I'm always trying to get them to get excited about crypto. Do you think that there will be an international wave that's part of this as well? Or do you think this will continue to be, driven by the sort of high GDP countries?
I actually feel it's more an international play, massively. And We were just talking to Arjun, who's now our co-CEO, and um, he's bringing a lot of that founder growth obsession mindset. And we talk about global scale on top of where we already are, because Kraken is actually one of the most global crypto exchanges, because while US is a massive market for all of us, Europe equally so is a huge market for Kraken. We're one of the top exchanges in terms of liquidity and volume in Europe. And in fact, on India, APAC, Vietnam, these are massively fast growing crypto markets. Yes, there are still struggles there, but all those countries have the next wave of disruptors and innovators who are coming, and we are seeing massive movements, at least in the world of DeFi and decentralized blockchain. And we strongly believe that not only that international growth is going to play a massive role, but also the role that crypto plays in those markets is very different than the role that crypto plays in developed markets like the US and
More
UK.
functional, you mean?
More functional and survival instinct. It is, for us, we think about crypto as an asset class to diversifying your portfolio. In many markets around the world, this is how you survive. This is a mode of getting access to something you will never get. This is a mode to protect your hard-earned wealth against massive disruption that are absolutely out of control economically and politically. So I think this is far more fundamental in countries like that around Africa, Asia, and more. And I think the future for this movement will in fact be laid by what happens in those countries and the massive adoption there.
Mayur, completely agree. I think that people always underestimate the countries that need more sophisticated financial rails versus the US that doesn't actually need it. We're just playing a gambling game.
I won't say that, but yes.
Do your own research.
Yes.
But I just want to, I know you have to run. So I want to, end this by asking you, what are your 3 recommendations for anyone trying to build a crypto brand right now? What are the 3 things they need to know to build a brand?
Regardless of which function they sit in. But I would say one is, if you're a marketer, if you're a growth person, if you're a brand builder, you cannot build a crypto brand unless you are living, breathing, swimming in that category, in that ecosystem, which is true for any tech product-led category. If you're not in it and you don't feel the anxiety and the aspirations and the mission, you're not going to be able to build the brand. So you have to be as in-depth as a marketer, as someone who's building products, someone who's in engineering. So that's one. 2, you cannot build a crypto brand unless you are rooted in crypto values and crypto ethos, because inadvertently and inevitably, you will have more headwinds than tailwinds when you're trying to challenge a 100-year-old industry. And if you're not rooted in that much bigger and far-sighted mission, you're going to have more hard days than good days. So you got to be rooted in there. And the third is, I'm thinking on the fly, is velocity. You've got to be able to self-disrupt, because the pace of innovation, the pace of movement in this category is unlike anything else. Maybe similar to AI, fast moving, but you have to be able to adapt, evolve very quickly. There's so much great stuff happening. And if you don't have that healthy, constructive paranoia to continue to disrupt yourself, you're going to struggle as a business.
What a way to end this podcast. Fascinating. We learned so much from you. Thank you for taking the time to share a little bit about your journey and about the great work you all are doing at Kraken. Gen Z community, make sure to follow along and check out all the great stuff Kraken is doing. And we're excited for their next wave of performance. I'm not going to say more thing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mayur.